Before we begin today's road trip, there's a story that I forgot to tell you guys. Do you remember that 50,000 degree spool fire that Trevor and I lit in Arizona? Natasha had let me borrow her camping chair, and during that night, the chair had blown into the fire and disintegrated almost instantly. I spent a long time trying to find another chair for her, and eventually, on the East Coast, I finally did. Well, Ian, Trevor, and myself are hanging out at Red Bluff. We're having a good time. We have a campfire. We're throwing Molotovs around. After we got done, we're walking back towards the campfire, and the chair that I bought to replace Natasha's had done the same thing. I start running towards it. I'm like, no, not again. And Ian is just dying laughing. He was like, dude, it was funny enough that your chair burned up, but the fact that you screamed not again, oh my God, that killed me. So, Natasha, if you're watching this, I never did get you another chair because they kept burning up. And at this point, I'm not sorry about it. All right, let's get back to the stories. When we last left off, Trevin had just got himself a brand new VW bus. Thanks to yours truly. Now that Trevin had his bus, everything at this point became about preparation for leaving. Trevin and I were only going to be there for another couple days before we were going to head back to Oregon. So we decided to go into town and switch out the 28-foot U-Haul that Trevin had gotten for a 10, and then also get some new tires for his van. We spent most of the day in town grabbing those tires, which seemed to be pretty easy. We found a U-Haul that would switch the 28 for the 10-foot, and we got back around 4 o'clock. When we got back, Ian suggested we use the pressure washer to clean off some of the components that came with this van. Most notably, the pop top was the dirtiest, and I couldn't believe how much grime came off this thing just by pressure washing it. We spent a few hours cleaning up the van, pressure washing everything, packing all of Trevin's stuff from my van into the U-Haul so that he could just take it if he decided to go back quicker. There came a point where Trevin and Ian went into town. They wanted to go to a Home Depot for some reason, and I decided to stay to continue to pack up, do some laundry, and pressure wash my van while it was out. When they got back, Ian walked up to me and he's like, "Hey Barry, I have a surprise for you. Can you give me your keys?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's not a problem." So I give him my keys, I go inside, I'm eating some food, I'm still packing up all my stuff. And eventually Ian comes back and he's like, "Hey Barry, so I left you a surprise in your van, but you have to find it." And I was like, okay. So I spent some time walking around the van trying to figure out what he could have done, and I found it pretty quickly. Everyone always said that thing looked like an Among Us character, and I'm really glad that he decided to do that. That night we hung out, we played some Rocket League with each other, and we were basically just preparing to say goodbye for the next morning. The next morning we got up, took some shots of our vans together, which looked amazing. We packed up the rest of our stuff, gave Ian a hug goodbye, and we took off. To be honest, it was really bittersweet leaving Ian's. That was probably some of the most fun that we had on the entire trip. And of course, we wanted to get back home, but it was really cool meeting Ian and his family. So Trevin and I started driving, and we were driving for hours. Not really a lot was happening during that time. We stopped to eat some food. There was one point we were driving down the road and people were swerving out of the way of something, and I caught it last second. Someone had dumped a trash can in the middle of the road, and I hit it so hard it disintegrated. I'm glad that I hit it head on instead of swerving out of the way. That bus is definitely not something you want to just jerk to the side randomly. But I was a little annoyed. Eventually, Trevin and I started approaching New Orleans, and so I radio him in. I was like, "Hey, Trev, do you want to stop and see the city?" And he's like, "Honestly, no, I don't. I want to just get back home as fast as possible. But you go ahead, you go see the city, and maybe we'll meet up at some other point." And I was like, "Yeah, that works for me. All right, I'll see you, dude." And I drove into New Orleans. It took me a little while to find a parking spot in the city, but I did find this parking garage right off of Bourbon Street, which is exactly where I wanted to go, so that was perfect. Bourbon Street was really cool, too. All down the sides of the roads, there are bars everywhere, and there's music filling the streets. You'll be walking down the road, and some guy will just be sitting there, and he's like, "Hey, you want some marijuana?" And you're just like, "No, I'm good, thank you." And he's like, "Hey, what do you want, cocaine?" And it's just like, "No, dude. It's like, what, 3 o'clock? No, I'm not doing cocaine at 3 o'clock. I know my time." So I'm going down the street and I see this smoke shop, so I walk inside. And inside they have these beautiful pipes. They have grinders, and I still had some weed that guy had given us on the freeway in Florida, and I didn't have any way to grind it up or smoke it. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna get myself something here. So unfortunately, I don't have the grinder anymore. It was really cool, but I gave that to someone on my second road trip. This pipe, though, I did get out there, and it's really pretty. I think it was only like $9 too. So I'm sitting there looking at it. I'm like, Yeah, that'll smoke some weed. Ring it up, baby. This is the point where things get really embarrassing because I lived in Vietnam. I know scams very well, and I still fell for this shit. It pisses me off, man. I'm walking down the street, and this guy approaches me, and he's like, "Hey, yo, I bet you I can tell you where you got those shoes." And I'm sitting there like, "Yeah?" He goes, "Yeah, well, I could tell you the street, I could tell you the city, I could tell you exactly where you got those shoes." And I'm sitting there in my head like, he's gonna say it. I have those shoes on my feet. I'm on Bourbon Street, New Orleans. He's probably gonna tell me all of that, right? And I don't know why I didn't say anything. It was like the way that he hooked me, it was kind of alluring. And so I just went along with it. It's like the dude knew how to scam so well, he could turn someone's mind off. So I'm just sitting there, allowing myself to get scammed. I'm like, all right, what? He goes, $20. I bet you I know where you got them shoes. I'm like, all right, where? He goes, you got those shoes on your feet in Bourbon Street, New Orleans. I'm like, God damn it. I knew you were going to do that. He's like, looks like you owe me $20. So I'm sitting there trying to find out how to get myself out of this situation now. And I know, like, once you fall for it, you're basically screwed. So I'm just kind of walking down the street. I'm like, I don't have money. I just bought like this pipe. And he's like, man, you made a deal, man. You got to do it. You know, that's keeping your word. And I'm like, oh my God. He's like, my wife, she's a big girl. She needs to be fed. So that's what I'm trying to do. And I'm just like, oh my God, fine. So I go to an ATM and I pull out $20 and I'm like, here, you have a nice day. And he's like, you keep those shoes well. I'm like, yeah, all right. They're on my feet. After that happened, I was walking around New Orleans for a little bit, and I kind of decided that I'd seen enough of what I wanted to see. It wasn't exactly a party period, so the bars were just running like normal. And I was going to stay for the nightlife, but there was only so much that I wanted to deal with, especially since that kind of situation could just happen as I get more and more drunk, and I just didn't want to deal with it. So I got back in my van and I just started driving all day until I found this little spot to huddle in for the night. The next morning I wake up and I go to a gas station, I fill up my van and I start driving all day. I'm sitting there on the road, everything's nice and easy and everything feels right. I realize I'm out of gas again, so I go to another gas station and I left my gas cap again at the other gas station. Oh my God. I just got a new one and then I just leave this one. Oh God. So eventually, as I was driving, I got to this place called Columbus, Texas. I settled into a hotel parking lot and I walked across the street to a Domino's Pizza. I'm sitting there in the van eating my pizza, looking around at everything I have. I'm watching a movie and I'm like, you know what? This is really nice. I'm all alone for the first time on this road trip. Trevin is already almost to Oregon by this point. He is flying, you know, and I'm just like, this is kind of cool. I can take my time. I don't have to rely on anyone else's needs or wants. I mean, don't get me wrong, it can be lonely, but it was just kind of cool. I wake up the next morning and I had left my van lights on all night, so my van was dead. Now, luckily, one thing that Adam had done when he had built the solar was he had supplied a cable that went from the car battery to the solar. So if I ever did drain my car's battery, I could flip this relay and it would take charge from the solar battery and deliver it to the car battery, and it would slowly over time charge up the van. And I thought that was great. So I turned that on, look outside, and realize it's cloudy as shit, so that's not even gonna work. So after a couple hours, I was at like 9 volts, and then it was like 2 or 3 hours later, I was at 11 volts, and I was like, you know what, no. And I just jumped out of the van, and I walked up to someone, and I was like, hey, could you give me a jump? And they were like, yeah. So they jumped me, it fired right up, and I kept on my way. As I was driving through Texas, there were 3 cities that cracked me up because they're in sequential order, and it actually is kind of funny because you could be going one way, and it forms a sentence. And you could be coming back the other way and it still forms a sentence. The sentence made up by these cities is comfort, warring, welfare. And it's kind of funny too. You go to Comfort and it looks like a really bougie place. You go to Warring and it seems like a general town. Welfare is about what you'd expect. So it's kind of funny to see like comfort warring welfare and welfare warring comfort. Like they're just at arms with each other. Like, oh God, it just made me laugh. I was probably bored on the road by myself. That's probably what it was. Yeah, thinking about it. As I was driving through Texas, one thing that I realized, especially towards El Paso, I didn't get any warnings on my phone throughout the entire trip. Almost at all. When I went through close to the border of Mexico, it was one after the other of child abduction warnings. And that was kind of rough to see. It made me realize that I don't ever want to live anywhere near El Paso or even like just anywhere near the border of Mexico. I don't want my kid being stolen. Like that just, you know, that sounds like a shitty time. It was literally every couple minutes, child abduction warning, child abduction warning, child abduction warning. And that's just kind of a rough thing to drive through, you know? I can't even imagine what their phones look like if you live there. Eventually, I made it to a city called Lordsburg and I slept for the night. Thinking about it though, I didn't really sleep very well. It was a really windy night. It was kind of cold and these tumbleweeds kept thrashing themselves against my van, which kept waking me up in the middle of the night. So I didn't sleep very well. I think I woke up at like 8:30 in the morning and just couldn't go back to bed. So I got up, I got myself some coffee, and I just continued on my way. As I was going down the road, I had this notification on my phone that said the wind speed was 19 miles an hour and it was going to get up to 25. Now, when you're a big box on wheels, wind is not your friend. So I was trying to get out of there as fast as possible, but I kept seeing these billboards. Come check out the thing. You have to see the thing. Don't miss it. It's the thing. And I'm sitting there like, what the hell is the thing? And I'm driving down the road and every 20 to 30 minutes, I keep seeing another billboard, come see the thing. And I was like, you know what? All right, I don't care about the wind. Maybe I can even just wait it out. I have to know what the thing is. That sounds too weird, right? So I finally get to this place and it looks like a giant gas station with like a McDonald's inside. And then it's got this large building attached to it. So I'm sitting there looking at it and on the large part, it says The Thing Museum. And so I'm just like, okay, this is very intriguing. And I walk inside and it's this huge gift shop, way larger than I'd seen anywhere prior. And I'm walking through and I was like, is this the thing? This is it? No way. So I go up and I walk up to this lady working at register and I was like, hey, so where's the thing? And she's like, it's okay. You see that back corner over there? Go back there. You pay $5. It's a museum and you walk through it. And I was like, oh, okay. That sounds kind of cool. So I go to the back, I give this guy $5 and I was like, hey, am I allowed to take my camera in there? He goes, you should. Take your camera in there and show it to as many people as possible because we would love more people to come check this out. And I was like, okay, very cool. So I go through these doors and what I walked through was not what I was expecting at all. See, this wasn't your stereotypical museum. It was a mock museum where someone had created this idea about what if aliens 65 million years ago came to this planet while the dinosaurs were around and used probes to control their minds? It told this elaborate story about how aliens had infected our planet for a long time and then the dinosaurs became smart enough and intelligent enough to start fighting back and then they were wiped out by the aliens and then as time went on, history kept going and you see the Incas and the Egyptians and the Sumerians, the British hanging out with these aliens, and they've infiltrated our world throughout this entire time. It told this crazy elaborate story, which was super fun to go through. I really enjoyed it. I actually went through it once and went all the way back and went through it again because it was so fun. The music they played in the museum really set the tone, and I just loved how obviously playful it was. No one was sitting there like, this is real, but on the sides of the walls and everything, it was like, did it happen? Winky face? Like, come on, you know. Now, at the very end of the museum, that's where you get to see the thing. The museum itself wasn't the thing. What they have in this big glass incubator is this alien with another alien head. Like, I don't know if it's carrying its baby or if like the head is like attached to it or something, but that's the thing. And they're like, this is evidence for what we're talking about. It's just a really good time. And honestly, I would recommend going to see it. It makes me very happy that someone was that creative and that passionate enough to build this little building and then pay for all these billboards for people to come in and not even have to learn anything. Just go in to have some fun with a playful idea. It was really cool. After that, I decided I was going to try to make my way to Mesa, Arizona. See, I had a friend that I met in 5th grade that apparently lived around Mesa, Arizona, and I wanted to go see her. Now, I knew I wasn't going to make it that day, so I went to stop off at this little campsite outside of Arizona, and on the map, it looked pretty good. See, the thing was, one of the later reviews did say that it was overrun by a homeless population, so I wanted to go check it out and make sure. So I get there, and that is what it was. It was a big campsite. There were tarps everywhere with tents all hooked together and connected. It was a little community, and I'm sitting there like, yeah, I definitely don't want to stay here. So I get back in the van, and I go to start it, and my throttle cable snaps. So I'm sitting there like, oh shit, I guess I have to stay here. So I get out of the van and I get underneath it, I grab some tools and I'm fixing my throttle cable and I finally got it reconnected. I jump back in the van and I go find another spot to stay. Now the spot that I ended up finding, it seemed pretty nice. It was like off this beat down road and then you go off that road down this embankment and then you're kind of in like a riverbed, a dried up riverbed. And it was nice. I was just sitting in there. I had my own little spot. Now, about 30 or 40 feet away, there were other campers sitting around, which was more than fine for me. I didn't care. Until the evening, when all of a sudden I just started hearing screaming in the middle of the night. I thought to myself, I might want to leave, but I had smoked weed, so I was really high, which didn't help. You know, you're in the woods alone. Marijuana can make you paranoid. And then I all of a sudden just hear some woman screaming her head off, and I'm sitting there like, I gotta load my gun. Eventually the screaming stopped and everything seemed like it was okay, so I just laid back and I watched myself a movie and I went to bed. The next morning I woke up and I went to this little spot in Arizona called Gilbert, and that's where my friend Mariah was from. We got together and we were hanging out for a little bit. We had not seen each other since we graduated high school. It was really cool to see her again and catch up with her life and stuff. We sat down in a Mexican restaurant. We were just talking about her life and what had been going on, and same with mine. She actually pulled out, they weren't tarot cards. They were like opal. I can't remember what they're called. Oracle. She pulled out these oracle cards and she started reading my cards for me and like talking about what kind of person I am. Eventually, we just started walking around town when we see this dog walking around by itself. So Mariah, she's a vet tech. We're sitting there looking at it and we're like, okay, well, maybe we should just follow it just to make sure that it's okay. Maybe it's going home, but we'll just keep an eye on it. It was this beautiful blue heeler, which is a very expensive dog. No one's just going to leave that by itself. So we're sitting there walking behind it, and this guy walks up to us. He's like, hey, is that your dog? And we're like, no, that's not ours. We were just following it. He goes, yeah, I was at my house, and I saw the dog walk by my house, and I realized, dude, that's an expensive dog. So I threw on some clothes, and I just started walking behind it. We were like, well, is it friendly? He goes, well, I tried to pick him up earlier, and he growled at me, so I would just kind of stay away. And we're like, yeah, that's a good plan. So we're sitting there following this dog for a little bit. We're getting to know this new guy, Dylan. And Dylan goes up with a water bottle and drops some water in front of the dog, and the dog starts drinking it up. We notice Dylan start to lean in, get real close to this dog's face, and that's when the dog lunges forward and bit Dylan in his face. Dylan is screaming, he's crying, he's bleeding, and we're just sitting there like, what the hell? Now, about 15 minutes before this, we had tried calling animal rescue and they were like, there's nothing we can do. Now that the dog had bit someone, everyone's calling the cops, and now we've got the fire department showing up, we got cops showing up, and they're like detaining the dog and moving Dylan over to a spot where they can clean him up. I pulled out my camera and I was like, hey Dylan, is it okay if I take shots of this? He goes, please do, and send them to me after. And I was like, okay. So I got a lot of gruesome photos of this and some videos, and you guys are going to be able to see that now. After Dylan was hauled away, Mariah and I just continued on our journey. We were walking around the suburbs. She's showing me the area. She was talking about her future plans. She was saying that she might buy her own van and then live in it with her brother or go try to live in a different place. She said, I love Arizona, but it's so goddamn hot. And I was like, no, I understand. We hung out until about 8 o'clock, and that was at the point where I was like, okay, I should probably go try to find a place to rest for the night. It was really good seeing you again, and next time I'm in Arizona, I'd like to see you again. She goes, yeah, that sounds great. I gave her a hug, I jumped in my van, and I headed for a spot. Now this was the thing, I knew where I was gonna stay. I had a pretty good idea of where I was gonna hang out for the night. I went to the Desert Donkey OHV, and in a way, it was like going back home. It was really cool because I got a spot that I'd gotten before and I was all alone this time. I kept hearing the donkey, and in the middle of the night, I heard coyotes screaming, which way off in the distance, it was actually really soothing. The next morning, I got up, got myself prepared, and I headed towards Las Vegas. I decided that since I was heading back home, I may as well travel north, hit Vegas one more time, and then make it back towards Oregon. Wouldn't take me long, and I get to have a little bit of fun before I go. So I finally get there, I park at the Treasure Island, and I go inside, and I decided it was time to win some of my money back. I was doing pretty good, too. I started with $50, made my way up to $110, and things were looking really good. I wasn't just playing blackjack, I was also playing this game called Baccarat, which is apparently way more 50-50 than any other game in the entire casino. And yeah, things were looking up. There would be points where I was taking the vouchers and I was putting them in my back pocket, and then I'd win some more and take some more vouchers, put them in my back pocket, and then I'd go up to the register and I'd cash them in and then come back and try to win again. I mean, I was doing well. And then they gave me one too many beers and I started messing up. They whittled me down to $50, which is what I started with. And at that point, I was like, you know what? No, I'm not going to lose money now. I'm just going to stop. So I pulled out my $50, cashed it back in, and I went back to my van. There was a point on my way back to the van, I had to cross the street to get to that parking garage. And I went across the street halfway while the sign said not to. And luckily for me, there was a cop right there. And he's sitting there making eye contact with me as I do. I'm like walking across the street looking at him. And he pulls out his like little walkie-talkie and he's like, "Sign's red, sir." And I looked back and I was like, I know. He's like, "Don't get run over." And I was like, "I'm sorry, thank you." I stayed in that parking garage for about 4 hours and 40 minutes and I was trying to sleep there, but there were just people all of a sudden doing burnouts or revving their engines as loud as they possibly could. And I was like, I just can't do this. So I drove towards this wildlife reserve that Trevin and I had stayed in when we were in Vegas that one time. The next morning I woke up and I just drove all day trying to make it as far as I possibly could. I just wanted to get back home. There came a point in the evening where I went to get some pizza and I was calling my mother and I'm just like, you know, yeah, I was trying to win in Vegas last night and I didn't, and it kind of sucks, you know. Like I had so many vouchers in my back pocket. Oh my God. I run out to my van and in my back pocket there is a $100 voucher still in there. And I was like, I won! I made $100. After my pizza, I settled in for the night, and the next day I drove 6 hours through Colorado, through California, and up to Oregon. I probably got home around 7 o'clock, and as soon as I did, my entire family was outside ready to welcome me back. That first road trip was an eye-opening experience. Firstly, I couldn't believe that my van never really broke down. I was really impressed with how well it was able to handle making it all the way from Oregon to Florida and back. This got me pumped and excited to do one more. And I did. And I will be telling those stories soon. Thank you all so much for following this series. I hope you had a blast coming along in this road trip with me. And I can't wait to share the second one with you. Thank you guys so much. And I'll see you then.